Hello, good morning, everyone. We welcome you to today's event on innovation for data security and privacy. Thank you so much for joining us today. For the first session, which is on technology stack for securing data, we have three panelists. Mr. Prakash Baskaran, he is the CEO and founder of Securely Share. Mr. Vishal Bindra, he is the CEO of Klassify. And Mr. Vishal Gupta, he is the CEO of Seclore.
Hi everyone.
Thank you so much to the panelists joining us today, and Mr. Vinayak. He will be moderating today's session. So to start with the first session, it is for 1 hour 15 minutes. You can post your questions on the chat window, or you can raise your hand, and we can bring you on stage at the end of 15 minutes, which we are reserving for Q&A. So over to you, Vinayak.
Yeah, thank you, Sonam. Hope I'm audible.
Yes, Vinayak, you are audible.
Thanks, Vishal, Bindra, Vishal Gupta, and Prakash to joining this session. So this is a kind of a short half-a-day event that we organize as a part of National Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity Technology Development and Product Entrepreneurship. So this is a joint initiative of DSA and Minister of Electronics and IT. So this center is being set up as a national effort to accelerate security technology development and innovation in the country. And we have been doing series of things since last 5-6 months of time as a part of this National Security Initiative of DSA and IT. We have been covering various different areas. So, for example, currently there is another series which is running, the Crypto Innovation Series, where every week that we have been interacting with a new startup working in the cryptography area. So, likewise, we have been covering many other areas, and we'll be covering many other technology innovation area as well as a part of this interaction. So, today is the day of looking at data security and data privacy. So this particular event, we have two sessions basically. One is technology stack for data security, and for that we have Prakash, who is CEO founder of Securely Share. It's his second successful venture, and we will be talking about his journey, his story, and more importantly, the technology he's building. We have Vishal Bindra, who is working for last 3-4 years on developing a data classification discovery tool, and it is becoming very important critical part on the backdrop of all the evaluations happening around data security and data privacy. So identifying data and classifying the data and creating data-centric architecture, the basic foundational element is the data classification of data. And we will be discussing with him about how his journey being an entrepreneur in cybersecurity field and what led him to think about this particular technology, this particular area, and build the technology around that. And then we have Vishal Gupta, who had been building. I think the story of Vishal Gupta is a little longer as compared to Prakash and Vishal Bindra. He has been building solution in information rights management, but now that is clubbed with many other components of data security. And when we say data-centric security architecture, I think probably a very foundational critical element is something that Vishal Gupta is building as a part of Seclore, and we will also discuss with him. So apart from this session, we have one more session. There's a networking break between these two sessions, a 15-minute networking break, and you all will be understanding this platform. This is again, Airmeet is a startup based out of Bangalore. They have been building this video conferencing and video event, virtual event platform. So in between, you would be able to go to some table, talk to your peers on the table, and have very good, interesting, engaging kind of interaction with the people joining in this particular event. So please take a benefit of that. So another important part of this platform is this very intuitive, engaging platform. You have the chat window where you can put your comments. There is a question also you can ask to the panel, and if you really want to ask a question and come on the stage, there is a raise your hand button as well. You can leverage that. So we kept this session as a very engaging, a dialogue-driven kind of a session, and we will really request the participation from the audience here as well. Having said all of this about this event, so I would now request you all to join me to welcome Vishal Bindra, Vishal Gupta, and Prakash Baskaran for this session. we'll start with briefly. You talk about Vishal, Bindra, Vishal Gupta, and Prakash about what you do, what is technology you're building, and how exactly you started. So briefly, you can talk about yourself and your organization, and then we'll start with our interaction engagement based on. I'll start with Prakash.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Thank you so much. So my journey started, in fact, 2007 with my previous startup, Pava Software. We started in the information rights management space. Had about 150 customers. We did a little bit of extra effort in making sure that the data security and data privacy can be used on everyday life. We did about fundamental R&D 3 years and filed for many patents. Then we exited to Cisco, but then now the journey, as securely shared, it's a 3-year-old company, 30 people, and we are continuing where we left off originally. Now we are building something called data security governance, or you can call it IRM 2.0. And our thesis is that with the explosion of data that is happening around the globe, and with open data, open banking API becoming mainstream, no longer, you can operate the data privacy, security, governance sitting outside of the data. All of them needs to be embedded within the data itself. So our policy is that our thesis is that you should embed the access controls, consent, and usage policies right there at the data level, so that various different data sets can be treated appropriately and the governance can be enforced across the organization in a uniform format. So we have a platform that provides multiple APIs. We have out-of-the-box products that gets enterprises started right away without writing any code. Very, very flexible platform. Would love to speak more during the course of the session.
So we'll come to Vishal Bindra. So there is always a saying that data classification is being said as a easier said than a done, right? And people say a lot about data classification, but it's very difficult to do at the ground level. So with that background, so how do you started looking at this problem? What made you to think about this problem, and how you built up? So briefly, you can talk and introduce yourself and your company, and then we will come across the very different dimensions of the discussion today.
Yeah, thanks. Welcome everybody. I hope everybody is safe. Yeah, a lot of my friends have been, WhatsApping me what happened to you in this lockdown. Yes, I just experimented with my look, got inspired by Vishal Gupta a little bit. Yeah, but that's what I wanted to try. Yeah. So yes, I mean, maybe one or two controversial statements may come out, but this is because that's how I've been, running this journey. Started way back in 1990 started my career with developing India's first antivirus software with two of my college friends. Uh, had a huge successful run. Then in '98, things changed for us. Pivoted to become an SI. But then it's like you always wanted to be in this space of product, and this is something that you understood well. And we in about 2015, we were I think looking at it. How do we really settle our next 10 years of journey, and how do we really do that? And while we were discussing all of this, whole thing, we, realized we were doing a lot of DLP projects, a lot of data governance projects, which were, we were helping customers. And we realized one very important basic thing that, data classification of, able to reduce the, at surface of data is going to become extremely important if we need to ensure that there is a huge automation that comes into place. Because ultimately, I think data is one thing that is very natural to automation, right? So either we're going to use it for automation or it is going to become automated, all of these things. So we started with the basic stuff of, doing the what we call as tagging data classification. And then, gradually ensure that we are able to, look at, complete, put a first discover your data through every single points where the data can be present, then putting into a context, ensuring that we are not really dependent on user, but can put a lot of ML and AI into this so that it can classify itself uh, based on context, based on compliance, and then make the basis of automation, so that all other things which are going to go downstream, which for our protection, for other things, should really become this. So our tagline from classification simplified has changed to making data smart by default. So we are saying that we should be able to ensure that data becomes smarter instead, so that it can take a decision. We are about 20 people team. We've got huge customers that we've been able to acquire, and I think the journey with these two gentlemen is going on. We are trying to work together with both of these. Hugely inspired, both of these guys. They really inspire me. Thanks, guys. So over to Vishal Gupta.
Yeah, Vishal. So this is one of the successful data security enterprise that we are running here in India. We have client base across the globe as well. So tell us where you started and what made you to think about data security, and tell us a little bit about yourself and the company.
Sure. So I think very early on you mentioned that the three of us are building companies. So I must pass on the credit very gracefully to the real engineering teams that are really building the product. We are just pretty faces on which have been plonked on the company banner. Yeah, but we are standing on the shoulder. I think I can say that for all three of us, we are standing on the shoulders of some really hard workers who are really doing the grunt work. But coming to Seclore story started about 9 years ago, actually a little before that, within the IIT Bombay campus. It as a part of a final year project. And then over a period of time, the company has grown, and I'll talk about the product. But currently, we are about 200 people spread across US, which is where I spend most of my time. The Middle East, a fledgling operation in Europe, in Basel, and then of course India, right, which is the main engineering and customer success organization. What Seclore does is that there have been technologies in the threat protection space which are covering devices and networks and applications kind of thing. And very early on, we realized that that protecting threats from entering devices and networks and applications is necessary but not sufficient, because what enterprises are really wanting to do in all of this is protect the data. And therefore today we have a data centric security platform which brings together the best of breed technologies which focus on data protection, which include DLP and CASB systems, the classification technologies, and we are working very closely with Vishal Bindra's team on the Klassify front. Rights management and encryption, which is the kind of genesis of Seclore itself, and data centric audits and analytics, where there are a lot of products in the security analytics space. Not many focus on the data centric audits. So really bringing together technologies which normally would be very diverse, and bringing it together so that the enterprise gets one view of what is happening. So the discovery, classification, protection, and tracking of data all in one platform, right? So that's what we do. Among our customers are some of the largest Fortune 100 companies in the world, which include the likes of Applied Materials, American Express, ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank, Unicredit, the largest bank in Italy, CIMB, the largest bank in Indonesia, and so on.
Yeah, and Vishal, I think this is a good introduction from all of you three about what you are, what your company does, and what is the product that you have before. So Vishal, as you are with you, Vishal, with I'm talking about. So there is you position yourself as a data centric security platform, or somebody who is driving the approach to security, which is more data centric in nature.
Right.
And the data is becoming central to many innovation right now. So digitization piece, and we are talking about in last 3-4 years, we have looked at very aggressive transformation to digitization. Everybody is talking that language. And now this COVID paradigm is also telling us that probably this is the only way that you can really survive your business or sustain your business or strive that business.
Mm-hmm.
So this data centrality and data centric security basically. So how that is different from a typical security approaches that people have been following, and when you catched up to work on this area, so what was the key driver for you to look at data as an area for you for working?
See, we came to a realization that there is no option, right? It's not that there are a set of options and among them you pick one of the options. There is no option. In our opinion, there is no option but for enterprises to start focusing on data, because uh, the traditional tenets of security have their basis on being able to control the thing that you're trying to secure, right? So you can only secure the devices that you control, right? So you can install an antivirus or a intrusion detection system or an application security system on devices, networks, and applications that you can control, right? And over a period of time, the devices have gone outside of the control of the enterprise because people are bringing in their own devices, mobile or otherwise. The network has gone outside of the control of the enterprise most of the time, including 100% of the employees today, or 100% of the people who are likely dialed in on this call are using personal networks not governed by the enterprise, right? And then with increasing adoption of the cloud, the applications have also gone out of the control of the enterprise. So the traditional tenets of security, which is I need to control my device and secure my device or the network or the application, the very things you're trying to control are to secure are not in the enterprise control. So how does one go about protecting stuff that is not even under the control of the enterprise? And in the wake of all of this, what is also happening is that there are external trends, so to say, right? The first and foremost for enterprises is increasing amounts of collaboration with external agencies, right? So enterprises, of course, have workforce of their own, but there are vendors, there are outsourcers, fabricators, lawyers, auditors, customers, partners, and so on. So the number of external agencies that end up participating in an enterprise workflow has increased so much that it is very difficult to draw the line between what is the enterprise and what is the rest of the world, right? So even people, I mean, adding to that list, even the people that you typically could go and do education sessions on and drive awareness, even the people are going outside of quote unquote the control of the enterprise, right? And to make matters worse, driven by DSCI, of course, and I know Rama just joined in this, is that the regulators are not helping, right, the enterprise, because the regulators are coming down harder and harder on the issues of security and privacy, right? So now enterprises have this thing where I don't control the device, I don't control the network, I don't control the application, the people are not mine, and regulators are coming after me to secure the data, right? So there is no option. There is no option for enterprises but to take a data centric approach to security, right? So it's kind of being pushed into the corner. uh, COVID and some of these cloud adoption things have only heightened that need, to the extent that it earlier used to be almost like a vitamin. It's a good to have. Okay, I have all of these network security, perimeter security kind of controls, and on top of that I'll add a layer of data security. And nowadays it's not that. It is almost like a painkiller. You need it. You need to have data centric security, and on top of that you also don't want to make sure that your applications go down or your devices are compromised and so on, right? So it's enterprises are kind of out of option as far as I'm concerned.
So I think this is good insight. But Vishal, Bindra, so you are largely working in data discovery and data classification, but the size of data and the volume of data is rising day by day quite significantly, right? And the complexity is also rising quite significantly. And data is spread across all the organization. Organization, as Vishal talked about, is extending a lot. It's not only the internal ecosystem, but there is entire new external ecosystem that is getting into the transaction processing ecosystem. And there are so many new vendors, players which are joining to process a transaction in organization. So these boundaries are definitely blurred, and so many possibilities are coming in that the possibility also brings a lot of new devices, a lot of new players into the market. So the volume and complexity of data. So how do you take care of that when you are devising data centric strategy? So how much this discovery tool helps you to really take care of the rising value, but the extended coverage in terms of the way data is being all across.
Yeah, so I think one of a few things I'll just pick it up from Mr. Gupta's conversation, saying that when we started this journey, and now I think the big shift, what he said that, it's more like a painkiller now. I mean, it is shift from vitamin to painkiller transition has happened very, very fast. When we were talking to customers earlier, it was few customers who were advanced in their journey of data security. They were the ones who were talking to us. A lot of time it was, when we talked about data discovery and other things, it would either be a prelude to DLP or something like that. And we've seen that huge change happening. I mean, we've been running both the projects, data discovery and classification for last 5 years, and we realized that the minute that discovery started to come into the picture, and people could see on a single platform, so it worked more like a next generation firewall. I mean, since I do that and I'm able to compare these two, that you could see, where your data is, and you could actually, start taking decisions on, what your, how your data really looks like and how you're going to really, utilize that data. And very important to you is that making this technology, and it is journey. It is not that we've reached there. I mean, the journey was how quickly we are able to identify the data, how closely to the data when it is getting created, we are able to capture it. That means, the example that I continue to give is that, you and me are having a conversation, and suddenly that conversation, starts to include a credit card number or a PAN card number or other things. We need to really elevate that so quickly to the next level of security, so that, it can now be processed, or all the security controls can be put in onto that immediately. User may not even realize. I mean, it's an exchange of email which is happening. You just put up information and just started sharing. But you need to quickly shift that particular, to the next level of compliance. Now, that is something that, we started using all those ML tools to increase the speed, try to automate as much as possible. And, when I say that, although, as a user, every time we're going to buy a car, we are looking at how much autonomous car that is. But while we are going to look at the data, we are not really worried that it is automated or not. And we need to really look at that. And we need to, with the speed and with the minimum people intervention between the systems, the processing is going to become more and more automated. We will need to ensure that while the data is getting created, I should be able to, tell all the further stuff that how it is going to get treated, and it should be able to change contextually. It is not a standard stuff. It needs to continuously be able to change contextually about it. So obviously, the journey of, as you said that, new devices, new stuff which is happening, it's a continuous story which is there. But we are trying to ensure that it needs to be looked at both the things, automated as well as user defined, so that a lot of times we will take journey to become automated in different devices and other things. But I think that's where the journey of APIs really come into the picture, although we are still developing that. But I think while we had a that wonderful experience with working with these two gentlemen, that how we really started to develop our API strategies along with these guys, how we could work along with each other without really getting embedded into each other, but cross utilizing the information both up and front. So I think we've seen a huge growth on that particular thing, and today I think it has become extremely easy for us to not worry about a new DLP coming in, whether we will comply with them or not. So they should be able to, out of the box, get integrated and able to take that journey forward. So I think that is something which is automation while we are developing, and automation after we have developed is extremely important for us.
Yeah. So Prakash, what I heard and what I know about what you do, so largely you are in the place of a digitization enabling space, right? So the the kind of extended ecosystem which both of them talked about, and delivery of data, open data ecosystem that we have been looking at, API-based transaction processing that we have been looking at. Even in banking system, people are working with API banking or open banking. So in that case, there is an increasing amount of data that will be shared, increasing amount of data that will be consumed, basically. And in that space that you work in, basically. So, but your work is largely IP-based work. So a lot of patents that you file in previous organization, this organization. So tell us about the IP story. Tell us about the whether the core research, is it something that your own idea that you rely on some of the research paper published by some academia? So tell us about that story.
Sure. I mean, as a product company, we always have to be forward-looking. There's a saying, if you are building something for today's need, you're going to be outdated in 6 months' time period. But when you look at what is coming down the pipe, whether it is in the BFSI industry or healthcare or anywhere else, with the consent layer of India coming up shortly, and all the privacy regulations that are popping up across the globe, whether it is CCPA or other the 15 states in the US passing their own privacy laws, or GDPR or PDP in India, all of them have some common element, but the requirements are not for today, but then future facing. So some of the things that I can talk about is the consent. When you are collecting data from this open banking and open data, not only you need to be worried about the data security aspects of it, data privacy aspect of it, but the most important factor is going to come into the picture is what is the purpose for which you collected a piece of data, how long the data should be used, and how it should be discarded. So that's why I said when I categorize myself, we are in the you can think of it as information rights management 2.0 or data security governance as Gartner calls it. The ability for you to embed the purpose of the data also is going to be so crucial. And then the second thing that is going to happen is, the data is not like Vishal Gupta was mentioning, data is no longer going to be restricted only within the boundaries of the enterprise. The data is going to be distributed. And most importantly, the consumers are going to have a lot of data coming in from the enterprises as well. And how are you going to enforce or ensure the privacy and the security of the data that you are delivering to the consumers? So there are many different aspects, many different buckets that are going to be coming into the picture. And our our way of looking at the IP is that it cannot only be unstructured data like files and documents. You got to be able to provide security, privacy, governance for structured data as well. Number one. Number two, while you do that, you got to be able to make sure that who is the data owner, who is the data recipient, who is going to be processing it, what is the purpose of it, what is the lifetime of it. So no longer you can operate these parameters from outside the data, all of them have to come inside the data. So that's where we spend a lot of time looking at, how we can fundamentally look at data differently. How do we get rid of the friction points that will come in the way of enforcing some of this privacy, security, and governance at the data level? And that's where we have gotten our inspiration for IP, if you will. And the last or latest patent that we have received is the ability to deliver secure messages for national identity, like an Aadhaar or a SingPass or a UAE. If you can make a payment to a national identity, why can't you deliver secure information to a national identity as well? So for you to look at the industry in a holistic manner, what is coming down the pipe, not just today, 2 years to 10 years down the road, there is a lot of research that we have to do and a lot of friction that we need to remove in the ecosystem. So that's our inspiration for going after IP and filing all these patents. And so we have now 7 granted patents and at least another 10 more on the way.
Okay. So Prakash, if I have to ask you a question about a key breakthrough, right? Key invention. So out of all of things you have been doing, and I will also ask the same thing to Vishal and Vishal Bindra as well. So what are those key breakthrough that key invention basically that you were able to achieve and that is really changed the story of sector leisure the way it is now?
So I would say, there are multiple elements to the portfolio of patents that we have, but I think the key element I would say is the separation of identity and encryption. If you look at the friction that exists today in enforcing the data security and data privacy, the tight integration of who you are and the keys that are used for you to encrypt the piece of data, that comes in the way. That involves like 7 to 15 steps depending upon how the technology is implemented. But for the data security to be available ubiquitously, that break needs to happen. So that's one of the patent that we talked about. And then the second one is the ability for you to do the encryption or decryption in a policy-driven way, not just do one encryption or one decryption, but then depending upon where the data resides, who the data owner is, what is the purpose for which the data is created or generated or collected. So the ability for you to enforce all these policies while you are enforcing the data security, I would say is another key aspect in making the data security governance ubiquitous.
So same question to you, Vishal Gupta. So what are those key invention and breakthrough that is really created a story of a Seclore's product?
I think in our case, it was to look at some of the biggest challenges that have come that enterprises, I mean, data centric security, rights management, to a large extent, even data classification are not particularly new technologies, right? And I don't think any of us here on the panel can claim to be the innovators in this space, right? Of the core space, right? But these technologies have run into a lot of challenges when they see large scale enterprise adoption. And the biggest of this by a big factor, and I think Vishal Bindra talked about it a little bit, is the dependence on people to adopt the technology, right? So if a person needs to go in and classify a document, or a person needs to go in and protect an email, that breaks down very quickly because large enterprises with hundreds of thousands of users don't have the time and patience or energy to educate 100,000 people around how to do a thing, right? I mean, there's a lot of things to do even outside. So the biggest breakthrough for us happened a couple of years ago, where actually more than a couple of years ago, where we were able to figure out a way to automate this process. So right from the data discovery to classification, some of the concepts that Vishal Bindra talked about, to protection, making policy decisions, and so on. If you can automate it away, then the adoption of the technology is not dependent on the security enthusiasm of the average workforce, right? And that requires, I mean, it is very, very difficult to make things simple, right? And I'm sure all of us here know this. And that bit, which is how do you automate the whole process? And in our case, I think within that, the most critical piece of this automation was how do you make a policy decision, right? So if I'm sending, using that same mailbox, using the same email system, I'm sending a lunch invitation to my colleague, and I'm also sending a forward-looking financial statement. Now, how do I make a security policy decision on both of these emails without involving the end user? Right? It's a tough problem to solve, and that's what we've been able to do using a variety of technologies, which I don't think we have time for on this session. But I think automation is going to play the key part, and we're going to see a generation now. I mean, we've already seen a generation of these technologies, which have, going back to the driverless car analogy of Prakash, who've tried to learn how to drive the car and have failed miserably. And now we have to get around to delivering driverless cars to them directly, right? So they don't need to learn how to drive the car, they just need to learn how to sit in the car, and they're on their way. So I think that moment where you can automate a process and therefore make it very amenable for large enterprises to adopt it at scale and business as usual was the key to large scale success for us. And we now have more than 100,000 people deployments across the world.
So Vishal, in respect to Klassify, so can you just briefly talk about the key breakthrough that you had achieved and that had really made the story, and not only story, also people started believing the story of the Klassify?
Yes, so I think coming down to I've already spoken that I think one of the biggest change and adaptation that I would really say is that, and I remember this conversation Vishal Gupta and me were having, is that what is the biggest key challenge? He said adaptation. And one of the taking a cue from there, if we really start talking about that what you can see is something that you can take a decision on. And when we started to look at, when our focus came into discussion. Extremely important for people to see where their data is, where does it belong, and not only doing the data discovery. I think the major breakthrough into the whole system was twofold. One was to be able to do. Second is that hello.
Yeah, Vishal.
Yeah. And the second was, sorry, I think my video.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
continue. Yeah.
yeah. So, so what really happened is that we were able to discover, we were able to put a context to it. And, when I'm able to put a context to it, I think it solves the problem that, Vishal said that, they've tried to solve it in their email systems and other things. But, what about other systems that you're going to really start using data? How are you going to really look at automation on archival solutions? How are you going to really use the same information when you have three different laws governing your data? How are you going to do that? And uh, as you are going to start sharing data, use consume data, it will change format. I mean, normal voucher getting converted to a balance sheet, it will go through the whole process, from becoming a internal document to extremely secretive document, then becoming a public document. How are you going to really take it through the journey, and who all will have an access and other things? We have decided to completely put our focus on trying to look at uh, able to find data in every single format which is getting created, put an automation process to it, so that we can make the decision much more easier. So today, if Prakash is giving out his encryption stuff to people, they don't need to really, they shouldn't really be able to need to figure it out that how are they going to use this. Am I right? Do I use it? Do I don't use it? Am I sending it internally? I'm sending to my sister concern. I'm sending it to a processor outside of my organization. So I mean, we need to start making, if your threats are going to be machine learned, we need to ensure that our data processing and data security needs to become machine learned. And all of these controls are extremely good. And I think the minute we start taking the controls away from the average user, imagine a 200,000 people, one classification done wrong per day leads to 200,000 documents being wrongly classified. I mean, you don't want to be in that information. You don't want to be in that situation. And I think, when we are going to customers and able to put a context to it, and the context, and we put a huge machine learning engine there so that it can continue to throw extremely, close how other people are using it, crowdsourcing that machine learning from within the organization to be able to take that decision. I think that is where our innovation is really, taking place, so that the rest, everything else just consumes our data points which we are giving it to them, and they can continue to do the automation further down.
So, Prakash, I think both three of you talked about the automation as one of the important area and how that automation. So, and then Vishal Bindra also talked about when you are doing this activity in a way that it reduces down the effort, human intervention required to do this kind of activity, then it becomes very easy to manage and govern as well. So one is definitely increasingly what we are trying to do in security. We are trying to reduce the cognitive burden on human, so that the security is more automated, more kind of a self-governing or self-healing kind of ecosystem that we are trying to get. In the process, we are really reducing the human intervention because the scale and complexity is too much for any human to really comprehend and work on that. So, so automation is definitely one. So, Prakash, you talk about cryptography, right? But I'll also, because this is a key part of the today's interaction, is the technology stack. So what kind of technology stack that you have been using to solve this problem? So identifying the problem, analyzing that problem, and identifying the primary and tertiary, secondary part of the problem is a one definitely important thing. But then there are these use cases that we looked at. So let's deliberate more, little bit on the technology stack that you have been practicing. So encryption is definitely one thing that Prakash you tried very hard. But what are other things that basically you look at when you are building the product?
Sure. So let me pick it up from where Vishal Bindra start. Right. If you look at the data security governance framework, if you want to have a unified approach towards security, privacy, and governance, the starting point is going to be the classification, the discovery, classification, categorization, whether it is on your endpoints or on your file systems or in your SaaS application. That is the discovery part is going to be the most critical element. Then the platform that we have, the stack that we have, needs to take care of multiple things. Security is one part, obviously. The policy management is going to be the other part. The consent management is going to be another part. And then the most important part is going to be the governance aspect of it. How you treat a piece of data in one way in India versus in another way in European EU region versus in some other way in the US, because you have all these privacy laws coming into the picture, and each of the regions needs to enforce the policies differently as well. So the policy management, like Vishal Gupta talked about, the information rights management, that's been there forever. But the ability for you to not only look at a piece of data, secure it, but the ability to treat it differently in different geography is going to be very crucial. So I will give you an example. We have integrated DSG Vault, which is our product, with a payroll software provider. A SaaS company operates in 37 countries, has 900 corporate enterprises, million employees. Information is being processed every month. But it is one software that takes in the data from all the enterprise customers. Now your employee data and the transactional business data is all mixed together. And the employee data needs to be treated in particular way in EU region, another way in India, and then another way in the US. Not only the laws needs to be looked at, but the residency of the data needs to be looked at as well. So the technology stack that we have should have the security elements, yes, policy elements, yes, consent element, yes, but the ability to be aware of, what governance elements needs to be enforced as well. So that's a key component that we have added in the recent technology stack that we have.
I have a contrarian view on this from both Vishal, Bindra, and Prakash here. See, in the sense that the discovery, classification, and protection of the whole enterprise data is a lofty goal. It's also something which is a very heavy lift in most cases. For large enterprises, it becomes a very heavy lift if you're trying to automatically or manually, for that matter, classify, discover all of and a lot of times the easier things for enterprises to do is to first focus on things which are already known problems. Discovery and classification are kind of discovering new problems, whereas most enterprises have a history and a backlog of problems that they already know they have, right? So for example, if I have a SharePoint site which focuses on board communication, I already know that that's extremely confidential content, and I need to protect it. And if this information in this library leaks, then there's a big corporate impact of this. And therefore, I can directly go and start protecting that particular library even before I go and do a discovery exercise for the larger data set. So our advice to enterprises is to first focus perhaps on the smaller, easier wins where the confidentiality and security of data is already known. Right? There's no need for discovery. I already know every folder in my file server which handles confidential information. No need for discovery. Right? Every folder on SharePoint or Box or whatever systems I have, and therefore the more pragmatic view and our definite the view that we are going out with is, hey, if you already know your problems, which is the case in a lot of enterprises, focus on the early wins first, which you can achieve in a week, and the whole data centric security projects tend to last a long time, and enterprises don't have the patience for that kind of time horizon to see these early wins, right? So that's, I think, a little bit of contrarian view that this is not a sequential process. You can enter the data centric security thing at any point of time, depending on where in your life cycle are you. Back to you, Vinayak.
Yeah, so I think I understand. So this is a very there are very common sensial kind of a view to apply and some of those things. But the question comes when there is a nuances, right? And the question comes when so there is always a saying that the on one hand the volume and complexity is rising, and when problem becomes any issue happens, like especially with respect to data, the specifics becomes more important. Because at one time you have to look at all the coverage and all the value. On the other hand, if something happens, one small problem happens, that creates a lot of larger ramification in the current context of the regulatory. And that's why you need a very nuanced approach, put together the common sensical approach that you talked about, right? Uh, uh, Prakash, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to
Yeah.
say something.
Yeah.
Um, Vishal is right. Vishal Gupta is right. If you already know where your data is, and yeah, why go discover for confidential information, if you know this SharePoint contains all the board meetings. But today that is not the case. In the last 2 months, we got so many calls from large banks. We know our employees are accessing files from VPN, and now we understood that these files have, and we are already in violation, right? As long as it is in a constrained network, it is in a centralized location. You're absolutely right. Why discover? We know where the confidential information is. But especially in the COVID situation, especially with distributed workforce now, you no longer have that confined environment. So it is going to be critical to have the data centric approach, but at the same time, you also need to know which piece of file or which piece of data is being transferred across the network that is sensitive in nature, and then apply the security policies accordingly.
So, sorry, I'll just like to come in. I'm not surprised with his views opposite of ours. That's been lifelong problem. That's been a lifelong problem. Okay, but
Good problem.
I'll take a view very simple. Yeah, good problem. Good problem. Uh, yeah, but even before any three of us really came into being, and we started this thing. I think this problem was known to people. They have kept it in where they're keeping their most important data, probably in a SharePoint or any other things. And by just putting a simple encryption, they could have solved a lot of problems. Okay, people don't do that. I mean, unfortunately, we need to really understand this more from a behavioral perspective. I mean, we understand that if we patch our machines properly, our threat attack surfaces would come down. We're still not able to do that. But so that is what I think. When we really and I think it's very important to tell one very important thing while we do the discovery. I think the most important portion is that while we are able to show in a complete data lake that what are your threat score, what are your machine threat score, what is your user threat score, how are you really faring towards a particular compliance. Once I know that I'm in a very very risky situation, I probably will take a far more corrective actions. So I mean, I'm not really again really disputing what Vishal Gupta is saying. That's a common sense, as you rightly said. It's a common sense. Why should we really need a discovery tool to do that? We don't need to do that. But unfortunately, that is what the enterprises, really run, because that is somebody else's job and this is somebody else's job. And they're not really talking to each other. And unless you have been able to really showcase to them, see now your threat score is now really bad. And that is now getting published to at least about 30 people within an organization, and you end up paying a fine for it, somebody's neck onto the job. While we do classification, I think one of the most important things that I continue to talk to customers is you put non-reputation. Vishal Bindra has agreed that this data is now going to be treated like that. So I mean, a CISO or a data security or your CIO or CISO, he may not even know that what are you guys trying to do. I mean, is it internal data, is it external data? And let's say it's a new data, I'm not able to put a context to it and other things. So I think it is extremely important to ensure that we are able to identify. And to the problem which Vishal Gupta said, is that when we start these projects, we actually run it in 360 degrees, or I'll say at least left and right. That means if today the customer is going to start using it, how he starts using it from today to a data which is getting generated from now on, and how he really goes about trying to do his historical data. So, we are not trying to mix these two. That process will continue
Yeah.
to take time.
Yeah.
But, we have a very, very, straight view of we should be able to start giving him the benefit right from day one, rather than, saying that, okay, I'll run it for next 6 months and then the picture would come in.
Yeah. So I think
Sorry, Vishal, I like to refute.
yeah, that's okay. So,
If we all agree, somebody.
so Vishal, as we are with you now, so this technology stack, and there are questions now. I'll start picking up the question which is put into this question window. So there are couple of questions on this part, and we are into this technology stack. So you talked about without manual intervention, the classification can happen. You talked about the machine learning that you have been deploying, or NLP technology you have been deploying. So tell us more about so what kind of capabilities that you have been creating. So what kind of machine learning, AI, NLP ecosystem that you have been building. So then I will go to Prakash and Vishal Gupta. So because couple of questions marked to you, Vishal Bindra, about how this AIML is playing role into data classification, automated data classification, what kind of investment you are making. And another question is largely how you are bringing the context. Context is how you are engineering bringing the business context to the taking decision.
Okay, I think that's too much of a technical question for me. Yeah,
Vishal,
but
Bindra, you have that look. That's why all the questions are coming to you.
I should have saved. That was only to beat you and Prakash at their game. So I think, yeah. I think, while we started doing this, so I told you that it's a journey, and it needs to really go, in a two very straight phase, that, we need to continue to expand our, device connectivity that we can collect data from, and kind of data that we can process. So, we very, I think we've been, really spending more than half of our discussion time on trying to look at that. How do we really make it into a, big data processing capability, that what we do, which is something that what we do. And what we started doing right from a very beginning, and this is what really helped us, devise this whole ML journey for us, is that, when we were starting to do what we call as a, manual data discovery, manual data classification, that every time we will throw out a, pop up, and you need to choose what classification you're going to use. We started to insert, what we call as a, it was called a GID at that time. It was an identification that, why this particular data has been marked as particular classification. After we could collect a large amount of data, we started to look at the, how we can, continue to process it. What exact ML engines and other things, I think, my team can, really dwell more upon it. But, we've really looked at, how, what are the contexts that Google, for example, Google really uses. Is very, very, very strong, ML and context engine that, they've been able to build up, and other things. So we started to pick up nuances from what are they doing. How is it that, we really went back and looked at how, what are the base engines that, a lot of these, new age products they're using, that they can actually figure out that, this is Vishal Bindra, this is Vishal Gupta, from a facial context and other things. All of those base things that we started to learn, and, ensure that we can bring it down. And for us, it was not, we never wanted to do it at such a large scale. We wanted to ensure that we can do it in a context. So first engine that we developed was from a, what we call as a, from a text to context. I think that is something that, I would like to say that, there is a text and we put a context to it. And then, we first we fixed up is that, can we look at a compliance? That means, the first thing is that put a context and put that context into a compliance, so that, we can give that, okay, this is PCI data, this is PDP data, this is GDPR data, this is health data. And, that is something that what we did. And then we started to speed up the process. So I think, instead of, we first speeding up the process and then trying to put it in different baskets, is something that, we took a little different approach. We said, let it be slow for time being, and, we should be able to put those things in place where we are able to mitigate the risk even at a lower level or at a lower speed. And now we are working to ensure that we can, do more and more ML and do that things. But I'll be happy that it is Vishal at Klassify.in. If somebody really wants to go a deep thing, I can put across to my CTO and other things that what are the exact stack engines that what you're doing. But we're using all kind of harnesses we are doing. When we are looking at AI, AWS data, we are trying to look at what are the AWS engine which we can use, what is the Google engine we can use, and continue to build our stuff. Because one of the interesting things that we realize is that everybody says cloud, everybody is saying cloud delivered and other things. But when we are talking about classification, I mean, largest of the customer wants to keep it in-house. I mean, I'm not able to, figure it out what is the reason, because anyways, in other formats, his data is anyways lying on cloud. Okay, but he's saying that I want to keep it inside because now you've been able to bucketize that particular data. That gives us a very big platform that I can actually do ML separately for one organization, and I can do one for other person. So I mean, you don't need to really depend on one huge data lake where I'm going to do threat hunting, like all other firewalls, antiviruses are moving in. So I'm actually doing which is core to you, which is if I'm a bank and a particular kind of a data which is going to become important for me, I'll continue to do more of ML for you, and that ML engine may not be the exact engine which manufacturing will use.
So I think I'm picking up two or three questions, which are largely meant for Vishal, Gupta, and Prakash. And I'll put together both of these questions to you. So one is the advancement of cryptography and how you are using that to solve the problem. Another question is the specific question on data at a rest and data in motion. So what are the business use cases basically that are really driving the innovation in the data at rest and data motion, and what kind of those drivers, basically the use cases which are require you to focus on rest and motion. So first question is on cryptography, how you're leveraging it. And second question is data at rest and data at motion, what kind of business use cases and how you're driving it. So start with Prakash first and then Vishal.
Okay. Yeah. So from the cryptography perspective, it is a double-edged sword. If you say that you got your own encryption algorithm to solve the problem, it's going to take next 30 years for you to prove that your encryption is better than anybody else. So we stuck with the standard AES 256 encryption algorithm. From the algorithm perspective, we don't have our own algorithm method. But from the key management perspective, that is where you can get very, very innovative. Instead of you having to store all the keys in one centralized location, or instead of you having to assign a key ahead of time to a particular user or particular group or particular policy, what we have done is we made it extremely, extremely dynamic. So for example, using our technology for the first time, you can actually replace password protected PDF. The reason billions of statements every month still is going out in the password protected PDF is that nobody is ready to change the user behavior, number one. Number two, if you increase the security standards even a bit, it becomes a prohibitive thing for the user to come online. So with our technology, actually, you can remove the password for the end user. But at the same time, the cryptography strength can be as good as AES 256. So that's one thing I would say. And then the second thing is, this is something Vishal Gupta is also doing on the Seclore, is that if you don't trust the way we manage the keys, we are very happy to offload that to you. You bring your own keys, you bring your own certificate. So that functionality is also inbuilt into the technology stack.
Yeah, I generally agree with Prakash for a change, but I generally agree with Prakash that cryptography is in some sense outside of the scope of this data-centric security stack, because cryptography is a very generic. It's used in network security. It is used in application security, right? Cryptography is kind of more omnipresent than this field of security that we are focused on, and it's best to align to industry standards and create something of our own, right? So by far. our take on this whole artificial intelligence, machine learning thing, again, is that artificial intelligence and machine learning comes in when the human intelligence or whatever is the work that has already been done by people becomes inadequate. And our take on this is that a lot of times, the majority of the cases, the hard work of defining and even implementing security policies has been done in large enterprises, right? So for example, systems like SAP or the core banking system or even file servers and box, they already have security policies, right? So for example, if general ledger data should only be accessed by the CFO and the finance team, now this is already an existing security policy in SAP, right? For example. And for most part, the data centric security kind of paradigm should extend from that, right? It shouldn't go back and re-engineer whatever is the security policies already defined in existing enterprise systems. And therefore, our take on automation is more about how can you take this security intelligence, if you may, from the existing systems that already exist first, and wherever these are inadequate or non-existent, that's where the artificial intelligence and machine learning comes in and play, kind of does the last mile or the last 20%, right? But large enterprises have a lot of security, have a lot of systems, and each of them comes with their own security policy, and just combining or extending that security policy is usually it's definitely necessary and in a lot of cases sufficient.
So let's now discuss about because you had been talking and I learned from Vishal Bindra that so there is, even you are in the same space, you have a lot of possibility to collaborate with each other, and already Klassify and Seclore is working together, and there's possibility of working all of you together as well. So all this is possible because you are increasingly going for open architecture. So you are building the API story, and the API story is very important because without getting into systems, you can still build up that layer basically. So let us hear from you. So what kind of such a strategies that you have been building to integrate, collaborate with the other ecosystem, other solutions, basically your enterprise larger systems. So I'm talking about two things. One is the business enabling systems, the way Prakash I heard, and from you, Vishal as well I heard. Another part is the security monitoring and security management system. So how this integration piece is happening, and what is your API story? And all of three can comment on this.
So
Yeah,
I can go first. I mean, so our actually first, I mean, it's very interesting. Our first API integration really started with these two gentlemen. I mean, so it's. I mean, thank you both of you. I mean, yeah. So I mean, so I think Prakash and me discussed, Vishal and me discussed, and we discussed. I think a lot of this, what we are discussing about automation or a lot of these things and other things, and we ended up integrating this thing, and we are not only integrating one with other, but it's like vice versa also, so that we can digest their information and they can digest our information. And very interestingly that when I talked about my data representation and data risk representation, we are now we are now working with a lot of infrastructure companies, infrastructure security companies, which are actually showcasing that okay, you have this kind of a risk score, you have your infrastructure is this score. And while they were coming to us and we were discussing, and I said, where is your data score? If you're doing all of these things, you're trying to ensure that your data is protected, right? That is what this should imply. Otherwise, if my firewall, even if my firewall is being attacked and nothing is happening to my data, if my firewall is being attacked and nothing is happening to my data, I shouldn't really be too bothered, right? As a user. They said yes, and that is where now we are working with at least about 5 of the companies which are on a infrastructure side. They do infrastructure security, or they do what we call network security, or vulnerability management, and we are now pushing our data score to them using our API, so that they can now have a 360-degree view, saying that okay, this is what if you're using classified data discovery, this is what we are able to tell you, that this
yeah.
okay, you have a firewall issues, you have application security issues, but this is your data score.
Yeah.
Sorry, just
So,
wanted to. Yeah.
I think let's be brief because we have so many questions to cover. So, Prakash, and then Vishal.
Sure. So when we restarted Securely Share in the Information Rights Management 2.0, as I call it, we basically distributed the whole thing. So the entire platform is built on microservices. The architecture is so distributed. Storage can be separate, compute can be separate, etc. With the entire idea that not only moving forward things should be data centric, but it should be application centric also. So let me give a couple of examples. I already talked about the integration with the payroll software, but then we are in a couple of banks gone live protecting Aadhaar numbers, and the only way that can happen is if we give our APIs to the banks so that they can call the APIs through their core banking or payment systems and push the Aadhaar numbers into the vault, and so that they can show the governance aspect of it. So as more and more open data comes into the picture, open banking API comes into the picture, when the India stack consent layer goes live, I think it is going to be very crucial to have an API ecosystem. And we know we are not going to be able to integrate with everything that's out there. So our goal is to provide the stack in a manner that any ecosystem, any enterprise, any application should be able to call our APIs, whether to store the data, protect the data, or share the data. They should be able to build their own applications. So we are already on that way. We are working with like at least 6 different partners in getting the platform embedded deeply into their application, whether it is an enterprise application or SaaS application.
So Vishal, before I come to you, Vishal, Bindra, and three of you, there are some questions. You can also try to answer them over the chat box as well. So if you just click the question, you'll get to see the questions as well. So there are very specific question to Vishal you. So over to you, Vishal.
Oh, okay. I'm just reading all the questions now. But just going back to you, Vinayak, what you were saying earlier is that integration is definitely what should be adopted, this kind of technology, whether it's classification, discovery, encryption, rights management, and so on. And making our respective technologies open and integration friendly is, I think, the core responsibility of everybody here, from an enterprise concern around vendor lock-in, right? So if an enterprise makes a decision to go and deploy Seclore or Klassify today, they shouldn't be locked into that technology forever, right? And therefore APIs become important to that goal, but also driving the value, because every time there is no integration, there is a person who gets involved, and then automation fails, right? So and over a period of time now, there are about 80 different applications that have either integrated with Seclore or Seclore is integrated with that, which includes ERP systems, core banking systems, file sync and share, document manage, the whole gamut of technologies. Yeah.
So now the last question which I want to put, and then we'll try to cover up two more questions out of this group that we have already have so many questions. So one is the platformization strategy that you think you must be thinking. So platformization is basically it's not a point implementation. It's an implementation where it also gives you a lot of learning back. So one system is so many of your clients use that system in a very standardized way. They leverage, but they also contribute back their experiences to the platform, and then you leverage that to enhance the system and also benefit others as well. So, and most of the security solutions are going that way. So, is there a specific strategy that you're taking to platform way of delivering security that you have been doing?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the question of APIs and how openly available are those APIs and how freely usable, right? And the days of having closed systems is over, and also standards take a long time to come in any. So the reality is that in the data centric security world, there are no standards, and therefore openness of APIs is kind of the only way to drive adoption, right? And I think all of us here, and maybe the larger ecosystem in the world, is heading towards completely open APIs, right? Use it as a service whenever it's the right.
Yeah. So, Vishal, Bindra, like there are almost 3 or 4 questions on a classification. Some are
Yeah,
raising doubt about.
I, I saw that.
It talks about
Interesting. That's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
So it talks about the. I mean, there is definitely false positive or false negative side. So there is definitely question on based on that. Somebody from NCX has asked that question. Somebody is asking about remediation part of it. Somebody is asking about. Uh, how why the classification can't manage the rights of data. So although you are already trying to do that, so because you are integrating with the Seclore and other solutions, that's why you are making that story. But the couple of those questions you can answer them briefly if you want. Otherwise,
Yeah, I mean, if you could just pick any question that you want me to answer, I'll do that. I mean,
so
for
there is
that,
one question about, and that would be applicable to all of these things. So one question is, there's still some risk left because solutions may not able to really drive the classification. So still there will be something raised, and that will create a risk. And there is one question, specific question, somebody from NCDX has asked, right? So what is your response to that? Because uh, uh, what that question basically takes, the data classification status changes between people and left unsecured many times. So people to people, some things may change, and that could create some kind of a problem. So you can briefly talk about it.
uh, somehow I actually lost everything that you said. It was my signal really went low. If you could just briefly just say it again, I'll just pick it
So
up from
I
there.
think it's making a generic way. So there's still false positive, negative, or contextuality, and contextuality based
Yes.
on the.
Okay. Okay. So I mean, whether false positives are there or not, answer is yes. Of course, they are there. But over the period of time, as I told you, I think as a process, what we've done is that, it's pretty easy for you to really look at a data which will fall into a particular compliance. For example, if it's a PCI data, it's a standard PCI data, right? So I mean, it's much easier for you to do that.
Yeah.
What really happens is that when we are trying, so we have a process where you can actually start defining what kind of a data to be treated in what particular way. So instead of leaving it completely onto a user driven classification, we sit down with the user, help him put a definition in place, what kind of a data they're going to start looking at. So once they've done the discovery, we will help them form that particular thing. But it is a self-learning tool. It is a learning tool which we work with customers very, very closely, and be able to ensure that he's able to do. But to tell you the answer, saying that is it that it'll be 100% accurate? I think it will be very stupid of
Yeah.
me to
Yeah.
say that it will be 100% accurate. It will never be. But from having a problem of scale of 1 to 100, now we are looking at problem of 1 to 10, and solving problem of 1 to 10 is far more easier. It is a learning process. It's a CMM kind of a process. You continue to become more mature over the system and other things. And as I told you that we are using a centralized system which is learning, and that is what we are focusing on. And answering your question, which you said that we use the context, and then trying to spread it across other users and other things, which may not really become very effective in our case, because everybody wants to treat their data a little separately. Then how they're going to really treat their internal
Yeah. So
internal users.
I think, and this was a really great conversation. Thanks, three of you. We really covered a lot of ground in terms of our interaction. But there are students, there are academia, there are startup, and there are some corporate plus corporate security professionals. And some of them are aspiring to do something in the area of cybersecurity. Right? So briefly, what this is last question to all of you. So briefly, what will be your advice to a new aspiring entrepreneur, likely to be entrepreneur? Yes, very briefly, if you can talk, and we can conclude with that final kind of comment from you.
I can go first. I think it's very important for everybody here to focus on building differential value. So if anybody is trying to do anything, look at the work that has already been done and build on top of that. Right? You don't really need to go back to the basics, because there's a lot of work. A lot of very smart people have spent a lot of time and energy in building various systems, right? So doing enough research about the kind of work that has already been done is very important. And a lot of startups that I see just do not do enough research about what is the work that is already been. So that's the one advice. And before I give the stage to the other speakers, the one thing that I wanted to compliment you, Vinayak and Rama and the whole team, is what an amazing job you guys have been doing. You've been kind of pecking away at this problem for a long time, and I must remind everybody, so kudos to the whole DSCI team, and I must remind everybody here that the organization here is Data Security Council of India. It's not the Application Security or the Threat Protection Council of India or any of that, right? So the name of the council itself is very representative of what you should focus on, right? It is the Data Security Council, right?
Yeah.
Back to you, Vinayak.
Yeah, Prakash and then Vishal.
Yeah, just to continue what Vishal said. Obviously, DSCI has been this the glue, to bring all the companies together and bring the policy together and the government elements together. So kudos to you and Rama and the team. I see a few questions as to how to get started on the data security, data privacy, etc. And I think people are trying to find out, especially the academic folks are trying to find out what is going to be the size of the industry and where to get started, etc. I think this is a problem that is only growing and it is not going to go away. The need for data security, data privacy, data governance is going to be there for the next 2 to 10 years and will increase. So strongly encouraged to pick up specialization in any of the areas available and pursue a career in this field. There's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. So briefly, Vishal, so that we'll conclude with your remark.
Yeah, I think there cannot be a better time to start on data security or cyber security as of now. I think we are, especially in India, we're now really seeing people really seeing the value of all of this. It's I think picking from Vishal Gupta, I think it'll be very good. Look at what work has been done. There is a huge uptake that you can take on that to ensure that you can do that, and focus on machine learning, AI. That is just starting. I mean, that is something that I would really say that get onto that very very strong. I mean, it is still in a very nascent stage. Just look at something, pick up a problem that you think you want to solve, and then pick it up from there. But extremely good thing. Two things again. I mean, it will be foolish of me to walk off saying that you guys are doing an extremely good job. You anyways know I am a great fan of DSCI. But I think I'll also like to give a big shout out to AirMeet. I think I told you this yesterday also. I think they deserve a good clap. Developing an Indian product, which we are not saying we are on Zoom, we are not on Meet. Great stuff. I think big hand to them.
Thank you, Vishal, and thanks all of you three, Vishal, Bindra, and Prakash, for being part of this interaction. I hope this is all of three stories are inspiring one, and they will also inspire many other stories as well. So thank you for joining, and all the participants. Thanks for your question, because your questions really add value to the deliberation that we have been doing it here. So we'll take a break for some time. In between, you can do the networking with the facility available in this platform, and we will go for the next session, which is on a privacy, but we'll be looking privacy from the perspective of technology. So please join us for that session as well. Thank you, Vishal, Prakash, and Vishal.
Thanks a lot, Vinayak. Thanks, Sonam.
Thank you everyone for a great discussion. And as you can see from the digital claps and emoticons, people are really enjoying this session. And thank you for catering these questions that the students especially put up across on data security. So we'll have a networking break for next 10 minutes. Everybody can take their seats in the social lounge and interact with the fellow attendees, and then we will start the second session. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.